Good afternoon to everybody, and thanks for meeting with us through the privileged screens that have permitted us to be connected even in the worst moments of the lockdown. I want to give a special thank you to Telefónica Foundation that keeps culture alive, and of course to Vivian Gornick, to whom I have the great pleasure to speak with this afternoon from Madrid. Before we start, only a brief reminder that this conversation is part of this year's edition of the Telos Forum called Remember the Future. Let me say a few words about the wonderful career of Vivian Gornick, who I met for the first time in May of 2018 here in Madrid, when life was different and we all lived in another world. For Vivian Gornick, self-narrative is a form of cultural criticism. The personal is always political. Born in the Bronx, she grew up in a family of working-class immigrants and began her career as a staff writer for the Village Voice. There she wrote articles, essays, and book reviews, concentrating mainly on the feminist movement. Her work has also appeared in the New York Times, in The Nation, The Atlantic Monthly, and many other publications. Towards the end of her career as a journalist, Gornick wrote Fierce Attachments, a memoir about her mother and herself that signified her transition between journalism and literature. Since then, she has written multiple essays collections and taught creative nonfiction. Gornick's most recent memoir, The Odd Woman and the City, was released in May 2015, written as a narrative collage that includes meditative pieces on the making of a modern feminist, the role of the flaneur in urban literature, and the evolution of friendship over the past 2 centuries. The Odd Woman and the City beautifully bookends Gornick's acclaimed Fierce Attachments. In Unfinished Business, Notes of a Chronic Rereader, her last book published in Spain, she revisits works by writers such as Marguerite Duras or Colette, which have been formative reading experiences for her. In her rereadings, Gornick adds a memoristic layer to her essays. Thank you very much, Vivian. I would like to start our conversation today somehow with the title of the forum, Remember the Future. What are, in your opinion, the scenarios that we are going to face in the medium and in the long term?
Who do you mean by we?
We, all society, our society.
Okay. Well, you know, I'm not a guru. I have no more special knowledge than anyone else. The future is a lot more yours than it is mine. You are going to live a lot longer and see many, many more changes. Mm-hmm. But it is certainly true that I've lived long enough to see tremendous changes in the time that I've been alive. And the thing that is so shocking for me is the speed with which things change now. Mm-hmm. 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 My mother lived a whole life that was much closer to the life of her mother. I have lived a life that bears practically no resemblance to my mother's life. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
I know.
Certainly as a feminist, as a woman, I've seen tremendous changes, even though the revolution is hardly won. There's much more to do. But as far as equality for women, for instance, mm-hmm. is concerned, it seems to me that the future holds tremendous excitement, hope for even more change than we have lived through.
Mhm.
Otherwise, it's very hard to know. It never, we here in the United States have, because of, well, everybody knows, because of Donald Trump, we've lived through such terrible times and such politically hard times, if you are at all progressive, that there have been times when I have really feared for the survival of the American democracy.
Mhm.
Now, I never felt that before in my long life. I have never, ever felt that before. But now we all do. Everyone I know does, and everyone really, if you have any smarts at all, the world has changed in ways that are totally unpredictable. So for me, the way forward is to do my work and try very hard to be a human being, a good human being every day. If we all did that, there'd be a lot more hope.
we all try, at least. We all try.
Try to know that is your obligation, to really, to be what the Jews call a mensch.
Yes.
Be a mensch.
Talking about obligations, Vivian, after all that we have been living through these almost past 2 years, what are, in your opinion, the main challenges and opportunities that will allow us to build a better world? And I remark on the words better world because I prefer to focus on our chances as a society.
Yes. What particular things do I think will make for a better world? Well, I think there's a tremendous amount of consciousness, of self-consciousness among more people than ever before in history. On the one hand, we live in the largest mass society that ever existed. There's never been a mass culture larger than the one we have. Now, that means that a lot of ignorance comes to the surface and a lot of intelligence at the same time. More people are more self-conscious about the meaning of their lives than I think ever before in history. And that in itself is a tremendous promise. I do believe that. I believe that since the 1970s or 80s, since the liberationist movements for gays and Blacks and women in the United States, since that time, I have believed at the same time that an incredible amount of ignorance came to the surface. A great deal of wisdom also has come. And these two forces are fighting each other more openly than ever before.
And what about our defects as a society, Vivian? I mean, what are the worst mistakes we have made in the 20th century, our most deplorable sins?
One of the worst mistakes? I don't know. I bet you can answer that. Well, give me an example of what you mean.
I mean, the climate change.
Oh, I see. Oh, yes, of course, yes. Yes, of course, I'm forgetting something very important. Yes, climate change is proof that the ability of humanity to understand its own problems and address them intelligently has always been a great difficulty. And, a world in the grip of capitalism is always bound to not have the sense to look ahead, to see forward. So now I think at this moment, the people who understand what climate change means are much more advanced and much more open and much more in the fore than ever before. But yes, indeed, it's the ability to live both in the present and in the future is almost impossible. You know what I mean? For people for people to have, especially people in power, to have the statesman-like ability to act for the common good at any time is very rare, and it's just as rare now. Nevertheless, their mass movements have saved us time and time again. And indeed, it feels often as if this mass movement is growing over climate change. Which, yeah, I mean, I won't live to see the end of the planet, but you might. What a thought.
My.
What a thought, right? Get to work.
Yes, but you know what? I have faith in the young generations.
Yeah.
I see people like Greta Thunberg or people like her, and I have faith.
Me too. Me too.
In the future, I am sure that our planet won't resist, but I have faith.
Good. That's the best way to go forward. Even if you have to renew that faith every day.
Yes. It's the only way. It's the only way.
The only way. Right.
Only way.
Yeah.
So, Vivian, let's talk a little bit about your work and how your work is related to the society that you live in, because in your work the personal is political. So, what do you think about the way that we have told us our own story so far?
I don't exactly understand that.
Yes. What do you think about how about these movements that are trying to rewrite the you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Okay.
I do. Well, since I took part in these movements in the last 40 years, it seems to me that a great deal has changed. Most importantly, the change has taken place, to whatever degree it has, in the minds of most people who 40 years ago could never have imagined that they would accept a woman who's openly gay, for instance. That 40 years ago, that was inconceivable. And the same goes, even though Black Lives Matter, and even though we're still in the grip of terrible racism in this country, it is 1,000 times better to be born Black today than it was 40 years ago or 50 years ago, right? Every year we know that, and Black people know that. Even though things remain, it isn't over until it's over. So things remain terrible, especially here, regarding racism. Nevertheless, at the same time, we recognize that social change, slow, nevertheless, is slowly accumulating. Certainly for women, that has been true. I mean, who could have imagined 40 or 50 years ago? Most of women's lives today don't bear any resemblance to the life that I was born into. And that's fantastic to me. To me, it feels like a revolution. Even though I know that social change takes place very, very slowly. When we were young feminists, we thought tomorrow, tomorrow the whole world will see what we see. And the older we got, the wiser we got to realize. Now, at the same time, the Me Too movement was a big shock to me, both to the good and to the bad. It shocked me to realize that very little had changed in terms of sexual harassment. That really shocked me. On the other hand, I was amazed once they opened their mouths at the anger of the young women, which showed us that they had expected a lot more than they've gotten. You know what I mean? That expectation alone represents change.
Mhm.
That, so many women rose up and to speak out against discrimination, inequality, all the terrible things. That in itself shows the change, that they're saying to us, to my generation, you've achieved too little and not too late, but late enough. You know what I mean? In other words, it's too little what you've achieved. We need more, and we're entitled to more. They never would have said that 40 years ago, but now they do. So that is all tremendously to the good. That's where the hope lies, and that you were alive during decades and generations in which you can visibly see change occurring. Every time a woman takes a job that she never could have held 40 years ago, you see your job. You would never have been interviewing me 40 years ago. A man would have been interviewing me.
Of course.
But, just look at that. Look at how many women are involved in this interview. All the women who are working with you, the sound person, this one, that one, they never would have been women. Never. It's very exciting for me.
Speaking of which, Vivian, you began writing criticism mainly for The Voice and The Nation when relations between men and women were changing so fast. You registered those changes in your own reading, in your own writing.
Yes.
How do you see those relations now? I mean, have all those changes been reflected in the young generations?
To a large degree, not completely by any means. No, there is still, I hear every single day, as I'm sure you do, certainly you do in Spain, you hear the complaints of unchanged view of men assuming that they have the right, they have special rights and women have lesser rights. Nevertheless, there are lots and lots of young people who, boys and girls, men and women, who are friends. They're friends to each other. They're not antagonists. They're not adversaries. They're not living as if they assume the man's position is dominant and the woman's position is subordinate. That is the successful change, but it's not fully accomplished by any means. There's still millions of people who are living that old life in which it's his life and she lives in order to fulfill his life, not her own. So, excuse me.
Are you okay?
I'm okay, yeah.
Okay.
So in other words, if you're as old as I am, you see a lot of change. If you're as young as you are, you don't perhaps see as much change. You're in the middle of the struggle.
Yes.
You are in the middle of the struggle. And every single day that you actually struggle with all the people around you, your friends, your relatives, your lovers, your husbands, you can comfort yourselves by saying you're in a historic struggle. You're in a struggle that is really worth making. And that's when you know that the personal is political.
Speaking of historic struggle, how have changed in the last decades the book publishing, the literary world, and cultural journalism? I mean, and this is the big question.
Yeah.
What future is waiting for all of the people that are involved in those worlds?
I too, like you, have hope. It looks terrible, and it looks as if the book culture is dying. I mean, it looks like it's, the digital world, the computer, the online world has taken over. But I don't believe that. I don't believe that is true. And I believe reading books is a powerful necessity. And no matter what happens, it will revive itself. I do believe that. I believe that you have to wait it out. This generation, my generation, certainly won't see it. But I do believe that the need for books is real and permanent and historic, and it will hang on and make itself felt. We just have to live lives as book people, and add our voices to that necessity. But I do believe that's a future I wish I could live to see what happens with books. But I believe it's a great necessity.
Look at my library. Just
I'm looking. I see the books. Yeah.
Yes, all of your books also.
I know my books.
Yes, yes. In fact, Vivian, you have written about yourself in marriage, in friendship, as a daughter, as a woman living alone in New York,
right.
As a writer who has difficulty with writing. I mean, is there anything about yourself that you are afraid to see?
Afraid to see?
Yes, to discover.
Oh, well, if I'm afraid, I'm not going to tell you.
Okay. Only for the readers.
Right, only the readers. No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm afraid.
Okay. But although you are best known as a memoirist, you are probably most influential as a critic. You get pretty personal in several of your book reviews, and you stay close to the text, but also you allow a space in your essays to examine the lives of the artists you write about.
Yes.
So I wonder, how close can one get to an author's life through the act of literary analysis?
I think the most important thing is to understand the relation between these two elements. And the most important thing is to keep your eye on the critique. The critique determines what you inspect, what you discover, you know what I mean? In other words, if a writer gets lost, especially a writer like me, who's making use of personal narrative, if I'm writing a critique and I want to use myself to elaborate on the argument, I have to remember at all times, the most important thing is the critique, not me. Not me. So if I lose it, I talk too much about myself. If I'm writing on target, I know exactly how much to use of myself. That takes years and years of practice, years and years of writing, to know exactly, to always remember, I'm never writing about myself. I'm using myself to write about something else. Get it? Yeah. In other words, the information I give about myself is instrumental. It's instrumental. It's
a tool.
Yes, exactly. It is a tool. It is a tool through which that's what was called personal journalism.
And how do you think about new journalism when you look back at that movement?
Oh, I think the movement is exciting, very exciting. It produced a lot of extremely good work, and it produced whole new forms, whole new genres. It elevated the personal narrative to a higher place than it ever had before, and a lot of bad stuff comes along with it. I mean, there are lots of lousy books that are nonfiction, autofiction, memoirs that really don't understand at all how to make use of this form. There's a lot of junk out there. Nevertheless, it's an enrichment of reading and writing and the whole enterprise of making literature.
Mhm.
So you who have hope, you have to look on the good side of that part of that too, even though there's a lot of bad stuff. The central idea of it is, I think, a plus, is a good.
Mhm, mhm. And thinking about how you work for the Village Boys,
Yeah.
I think it was 9 years.
Yeah, something like that.
Yes. So how do you feel that has influenced your work?
Oh, the Village Voice was, those years were very important in that I would say mostly when I worked at the Village Voice, I was on the barricades for radical feminism,
Mhm,
right? So I was working as a polemicist, polemics. I had a mission, and everything I wrote was serving that mission. Now, that way lies good and lies bad. What was good about it was it taught me the meaning of a point of view, what it means to have a point of view. That became crucial in my development as a writer, as it would with any writer, to understand what it means, the difference between simply reporting and having an idea in your head that the writing is going to illustrate. Those are two. What is the word? Those are two extremes at either end of the pole. So for all of the years that I worked at The Voice, and I was, as I say, I was always pushing feminism, I nevertheless understood that it was this point of view that had to shape the writing, but that the writing had to be shaped.
mhm, mhm.
And then later, when I became the writer I wanted to be, more or less, it was still the same. It was a point of view that taught me that I had to shape a piece of experience. So the voice years were very important for me.
Mhm, 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 mhm. And can you remember the exact moment when you left polemical journalism behind you to begin the kind of nonfiction storytelling you had longed to write?
Yeah, when I began to write Fierce Attachments.
Oh. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
That's
And
when journalism ended.
it was a decision you made. I mean, you wanted to write that book. You always knew you wanted to write that book.
Yes.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Not always, but for a long time.
Mm-hmm. 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 No, continue, please.
As a journalist, you are always a stranger in other people's lives. I wanted to become an intimate of my own life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Got that?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah.
It's
in other words, I wanted to stop being a stranger and to get inside my own life. I wanted to stop. Well, I wanted to stop doing journalism, and I wanted to try to make literature.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Out of the materials of my own life. That was the feminist movement. If it was not for the feminist movement, I never would have dreamed that I could do such a thing.
Mm-hmm. 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 Let's talk a little bit about this fantastic book. It's beautiful. I want to ask you about how important is in your life rereading. Not reading, but rereading, because yes, rereading, because in the book you write about how different is your or have been your relationships with writers such as Colette, for example, with the time.
Right. Yes, it's a great thing to reread a book many years after you first read it,
Mhm.
and then many years again, because each time around, you are a different person. The world is a different person, and you see the meaning of keeping company with a book. You see the way each rereading reflects the changes in you and in the world and in the meaning of the book. Colette is a perfect example. When Colette wrote about sexual passion being the central event of a woman's life, she did that at the turn of the 20th century.
Mm-hmm.
At the turn of the 21st century, no one could write that anymore.
Mm-hmm.
You see, and I am equally startled. I can see myself as a very young woman, as I do in the book, loving Colette and feeling that she is the greatest writer in the world. And then 50, 60 years later, seeing her as time bound, that what she is devoted to feels like it belongs to a long ago and far away.
Mm-hmm.
And that's thrilling. That's a thrilling thing. And that's why books will always be necessary and loved.
Mm-hmm.
They are themselves a kind of what's the word? I don't know. You know what litmus test is? You know those words? A litmus test. They are a litmus test for our lives.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it means a lot. It means a lot to reread all the time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The writer Nabokov said the only real readers are rereaders.
Yes, absolutely. Not writers are not readers, but rereaders. I think so. It's so beautiful how you write about Colette or Mary McCarthy, for example, as fonts of wisdom for you.
Yeah, they
Mhm.
were.
Mhm.
But you know, we girls had very few writers who resembled ourselves. There was almost nobody. These, when I was a girl, they were Colette, Mary McCarthy. They were just about the only two really famous writers whom we could turn to.
Mhm.
But they reflected their own world. They reflected the world in which they were living.
Mhm.
Today, they both seem dated.
Dated?
Dated. I mean, old-fashioned.
Yes. Do you think so? For example, yes, Colette.
Yeah, I can't read Colette anymore.
No?
No.
Oh my God. You know what? When I finished this book, your book,
You went back?
Yes, 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 I did. Yes, I did. I did.
Good, whatever.
Let me ask you, because as a memoirist, you develop a set of interacting characters and let them find the language that would best express their situation, their atmosphere. Mm-hmm. But you never let the feelings of others influence your writing?
I don't get that.
Yes. Do you ever think about how the others will feel about your writing?
No.
Never.
No.
Okay, that's perfect. That's the best way to write in a so marvelous way. Yeah, it's perfect. It's perfect. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about boundaries. Boundaries as borders, as frontiers, because what happens when the boundaries between fiction and reality almost disappear, which is in fact what has happened with the pandemic. I mean, reality is very close to fiction nowadays.
Yeah. Well, you tell me, are you observing tremendous changes in yourself or in the people you know or in the way you have experienced this last year and a half?
Not only in the way I have experienced, but also in the way I write. I mean, yes.
Oh, tell me.
Yes, it's like the contagious. I mean, I can't avoid the reality that surrounds me. So I write in a very different way.
Oh, really?
Yes, yes.
Not me. It has
No?
not. No.
Okay.
Actually, my particular life, since I do live alone,
Mhm.
I have suffered a lot less from being stuck in the house
Mhm.
than lots of other people, right? And I have never stopped walking.
Mhm.
And I've never stopped seeing people for 1 minute. I never allowed that to happen. You know what I mean? In other words, every single day out in the street, in the park across the street from my house, or I live close to the Hudson River.
Oh.
Yeah. So walking over to the river, I always managed every single day to have a little bit of ordinary life, because I knew this was going to end. I mean, and it hasn't ended, but I mean, it has never occurred to me for a minute that this is a permanent condition. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I haven't seen that much change. There have been some real shocks. There have been people whom I never would have suspected of being as terrified as they are. Really frightened. And mostly it's been the husbands of my women friends. The husbands have been more frightened than the wives.
Of course. Of course. It happens all the time. Not only in the pandemic.
That's right. It has really been a shock to see that. But otherwise, it never occurred to me that the world was changing permanently. But now I think maybe it is.
Yes.
Now I think maybe it is. So what I do every single day, I just wander around and I think about what I'm looking at to see, I just do that. There was a wonderful Polish journalist named Ryszard Kapuscinski.
Yes.
Ryszard Kapuscinski, Polish, right? He was Polish and he lived for 40 years in Africa as a journalist. And he was watching a continent changing violently every single day. And he had a marvelous attitude towards it all. He was always looking for the recognizably human, what he could recognize as human. And he wrote about that in relation to all the chaos that Africa was involved in over the last 50 years. So I take him as a model. I look for what's familiar, and then I try to see it in context, in what's happening around. So that's how I get through it.
It's a beautiful way to get through it.
Oh,
a very beautiful. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Has it made your writing more anxious or apocalyptic or something when you said?
No, not at all. Not at all. More personal.
Oh, I see. Oh,
Yes. Personal has become political, very political in these past 2 years. Yes. My writing is very personal now. But we are not talking about me, okay?
We're having a conversation, so we have to talk about you a little bit.
Yes. And it has been a great pleasure to talk to you again, Vivian, because I have missed to talk to people, but with the interaction that allow the Okay, so I have a last question for you, because we have been talking about writing, about readings, about other writers, but your essay, the reading group, is about a small group you joined in the 90s that read and discuss memoir together. So I wonder, are there any books so personal to you that you wouldn't want to share your thoughts on them in a reading group or in an essay?
No, do you feel that way about some books? That they're so precious to you that you don't want to discuss them, or you're afraid of what you care about in them? No, I don't understand that.
I'm not sure, but I won't mind to speak of them in terms of literature, but I'm not sure if I will be able to speak of them in my yes. I'm not sure. I'm not sure, because for me there are a few books so personal that they appeal to me to my heart even, that I'm not sure if I will be comfortable sharing that kind of feelings with, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I hear you. I see. Well, actually, now that you put it that way, I can certainly understand that. There have been books that I read in that group that I felt the same way about, that they struck my heart in a way that made me feel vulnerable.
Absolutely.
And I was, but what I did then was search for the words that would let my companions know how much the book meant to me without making myself vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
You look for the words that will, you're always looking for the words that will take you to the exact place where you want to be, or should be. That's a good note to end on.
Yes, it's a beautiful note to end. And I have to confess you that for me, your books, Vivian, I could speak of them forever. You know what I mean? It's like, yes, the way you feel about Colette is the way I feel about you. So thank you. Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for having this conversation with me today. It has been a great pleasure. So thank you, and I'm looking forward to see you maybe in New York or...
Oh, I hope so. When you come to New York, definitely look me up.
Yes, I will. So thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. It has been a great pleasure. Thank you. Bye-bye.